Hello and welcome back. In the nest with me today is somebody who has spent years in the trenches of sales. He's the author of Corporate Casual, a no BS guide to selling like you actually give a damn. He hosts not one, but two podcasts, and he's currently the chief growth officer at Kollecta.ai. Chris Walcher, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much, man. AJ, I've been a big follower of you, big fan of Parakeet, and I feel like I'd be remiss if I didn't kick this thing off by saying, hey, good flocking morning to you, big guy.
Hey,
Great to be
and
here.
I'm going to lock the flock right in with you, brother, there. Well,
Let's go.
Man,
Cheers.
Unreal. What a way to start this off.
Hey man, the only way to start this off.
This is going to be a good flocking podcast. I can tell you that. Let's get right into it, because you're a bit of a quote machine. You've got some good stuff that I pulled from this doing some research. I want to start with this one. Sales isn't just communication; it's interpretation. Now, I've got an idea of kind of what that means, but if you wouldn't mind, break that down for us. And what's the difference between somebody, particularly a rep or a seller, who's communicating and one that is interpreting?
So, I mean, it's kind of a loaded question to kick things off. So the first aspect of interpretation is everything to do with approach. Interpretation to me stems primarily from trying to get a basic understanding of, look, everybody has, your left brain or your right brain. So what that says to me is you're either moved by storytelling, emotion, like case studies. Tell me how it's going to make me feel if I go with you. And then there's the other side of the brain, which is a lot more analytically driven. Show me the numbers, show me the ROI, show me the net growth, the real numbers impact. And so interpretation in that respect is one, really clock in whether you're talking to a left brain or a right brain. And ultimately, that's going to cater what your approach is when you jump into the communication. And the second pivot of interpretation is the ability to stay quiet. And when you do talk, ask those open-ended questions to allow their storytelling or their input that they're sharing with you to be expanded upon. I know everything that they have to say is going to be gold for me eventually. And so one of the biggest mistakes agents make is they cut them off because, what's the expression? They're listening to respond rather than listening to understand. And that's kind of that magic of interpretation. Once you know, hey, are you left brain or are you right brain?
The topic of storytelling, let me paint the picture, versus exactly what you were kind of hinting at, right? The analytical side, the case studies, the testimonials, these are the cold, hard facts and numbers to it.
Yeah.
How can you start to interpret the difference of maybe when you're talking to somebody who is one or the other, and how do you start to tailor what you're saying and how you're asking these questions to get more of that information?
Yeah, so it's really a rinse and repeat process. Sometimes you get it right on the money, sometimes you get it wrong. But a couple of those early indicators for me, just in my experience at what I noticed about like the human psychology, is that if you are more storytelling driven or emotionally engaged, chances are the conversation is a lot lighter. It's a little more on the surface. You're like, whoa, we're vibing right now. Like, come on, dude. Where on the analytical side, it feels a little bit more suit and tie right from the jump. Maybe lower tonal inflection. The initial questions that are being asked are kind of poised in that, hey, man, we're going to jump into some hyper professional dialogue versus kicking off a call like, the weather is crazy, I'm shoveling 10 feet of snow. So those, just in terms of like the tone of voice, whether it's high pitched or lower inflection, those are some early indicators for me at what I could assume might be the left brain or right brain mentality.
You're an energetic guy. I mean, right off the rip, I've known that. You can tell it from your writing. Obviously, as I alluded to, you got a couple different podcasts. You're a little bit of a sparky dude, and I love it.
Let's go.
And I've talked to a number of people about this. One in particular, shout out James Buckley over there at Sell Better. He's worked with our team actually a couple times about that tonality. I've always been interested and captivated by people, especially some of the snake oil salesmen.
Yeah.
Of like, they're not really selling anything that's legitimate. They're not saying a whole lot. You can kind of think of almost your like political
Yeah.
characters, but man, do they sound good. Like, man, are they compelling. I'm assuming it comes a bit more natural to you, but do you give any coaching or like feedback on the team or other people that you work with on how to say the things you're already saying, just like with more vigor or excitement?
Look, I touch base on it a little bit in the corporate casual book that I released. But I mean, to be fair, and it's no secret, my favorite sales literature is not even really a sales book at all. This Chris Voss book, Never Split the
Mm.
Difference. And it's really just kind of rooted in the ability to read people. And really, the expression to answer your question is tactical empathy, right? Like, once you're able to kind of make an assumption on the left brain, right brain, or even in terms of the coaching with my team, anybody in my industry, not in my industry, in sales, not in sales, like, dude, some of the negotiation lessons that I've learned from Chris Voss, I use on my kids, dude. And so, no, I do. I test them out, mirroring the power of no, labeling, like all these really neat things. Because truth be told, if it can get a couple hostages that are held at gunpoint out of a bank, chances are it can help me step a little bit further in a sales deal or trying to convince my kids to go to bed. So I'm constantly preaching that stuff on the platform, in with my teams internally, because it works, dude. And it's all on like the psychology of sales, which is my favorite part of what we do.
I'm a big fan of Jocko Willink and his
Yeah, man.
extreme ownership, and I can very much hear already some people being just like, when you take it to the nth extreme, like, oh, okay, well, listen, I'm sitting behind a desk. I've got a motorized desk that lifts and right. Like, this isn't war, man. I just want to hit my quota and hit my commission. I very much appreciate and understand the respect of taking things to the nth degree to say, if this works on the battlefield of the extreme of all extremes, like, I bet you it works in the corporate environment. Like,
Yeah.
yes, let's make a couple tweaks here. Let's not hold people at gunpoint, but
Yeah.
like the principles are pretty sound there. And in the realm of tactical, I really am always I'm interested in that phrase tactical empathy, because I have an understanding of what it means, but I can also see how people can read, maybe, or maybe even misread in between the lines, and take that up as like a manipulation tactic,
Yeah.
which, like, listen, there's a lot of pros to being in the selling space, right? You're able to communicate and talk and persuasive, but on the other side, there can be that manipulation side. It feels like you're pushing me. Salespeople can be, quote, aggressive or like
Yeah.
sharks. In your mind, what is the difference between something like employing a tactical empathy strategy versus something more that's like straight up manipulation?
Yeah, dude, I love that question because even the difference book has been a lot of negative bias surrounding the manipulative tactics. And so the biggest differentiator into how you craft that into real value is, especially for a seller, my initial intent or objective is not to sell you anything. It's to understand. Because going back to your reference about, there are a bunch of slimy sales guys that are super aggressive, and they'll sell snow to an Eskimo. Eskimo doesn't need snow, you know what I mean? And so when you're, especially in a disco or you're in the early stages of conversation, I have zero intent on trying to sell you anything. I want to understand, I want to listen. And by all means, if you already have this perfect outfit, you're telling me the results are killer, we don't want to change a thing, like, who am I to like, if it isn't broken, don't fix it. I wouldn't try to fix it internally either. But using some of those fun negotiation tactics, especially like the open-ended questions or the mirroring, to get people to expand a little bit more, every now and then you do find that trigger word that they say where maybe their pain point, like in my world, I work in debt recovery. Maybe it's not liquidation or actual unpaid accounts, but maybe it turns into bandwidth. They drop a little, you know what, we only got 4 people in the invoicing department. And so sometimes that's why getting them to talk, that asking probing questions, listening to understand, is so key. I really think that's the curtail from having a strategic, tactical empathy conversation versus manipulation. Because at the end of the day, like, yes, do we have quotas? Ultimately, would it be dope for me to hit a sale? Yes, but not at the sacrifice of me selling you something that just really isn't a fit. So, like, let's just have a talk about it. And if it makes sense, it makes sense. If it doesn't, then you're dope. I'm dope. It was great that we're connected. Maybe sometime our paths will cross again.
The counterintuitive side of sales. I was, still am, plan to be in the future, a bit of a psychology nerd. So
Love
like
it.
the idea of like mirroring or understanding, like my big thing is like I need to know the why in any aspect of my life. I need to know the why. Once I understand the why, I can go, okay, I either agree or I don't agree. But either way, I've got a very good base understanding of it. And the counterintuitive nature of sales is so far as the I can get more trust out of you if I actually don't sell to you feels so foreign to people.
100%, bro.
And it's
100.
how like if you're a bit of a greener seller, right? A novice in the selling space, and you're a cog in a big selling machine, and you've got a big heavy quota hanging above your head, and you're feeling the pressure of all of this. Like, how can you continue to lead with those types of like trust building exercises to build future pipeline without feeling like the gravitational pull of like desperation selling of like, come
Yeah.
on, man, like please, like I need you to buy this from me.
Well, and that's like, dude, that's the balancing beam of this industry is like, one, I'm a firm believer that every seller sells different and you can't put them like there are these major enterprises that make everybody sell the same. They got the same KPIs like XYZ, right? And so that balancing act of I play the long game. And sometimes it's a really long game. And sometimes what I expect to be a long game ends up being a short game. So the consistency and the relationship building is really key. Now, look, I get it. There are SDRs and they got to fire out 100 phone calls a day and their intent is to book a meeting. But even in that world where there is more of a high pressure, like, dude, I got to hit this number or I'm not going to get my coin, booking a meeting is phenomenally different than locking in the sale, right? And so if the foundation of that, hey man, I just want to go like toe to toe with you and understand what your current circumstance is. It's not a slimy objective. And like, I know this word is so overused, but dude, just like be curious. I'm the type of guy where I don't care for CTAs. If somebody hits me in a LinkedIn DM on the first message and they're putting a booking link, like, bro, get out of here, man. You don't know anything about me. You know what I mean? And so there's a way to expedite that, hey, let's see if it makes sense type of dialogue. And so that's kind of for early sellers, for even latent stage sellers, like if you push the curiosity side and, hey, let me see if this makes sense versus shoving a product that could be a benefit or could not be a benefit. Really think that's that balancing act. And then, of course, in protecting and preserving your forecasted pipeline, you just got to stay consistent, man. Keep doing the things that you know work for you and keep trying to learn every day, be a student of the game, but stay consistent, man, because the outreach, it really does work. It's just what is your approach and what's the language that you're trying to leverage when you perform that outreach.
The topic of be curious and be consistent is something I've had a number of these calls and conversations and meetings with folks, and like that to me is probably one of the most succinct and all encompassing description of like what makes a really good seller. Like they're curious and they're consistent. I feel like you may have an interesting take on this, but like, do you think that sellers can actually be trained and taught to be high quality and high converting sellers, or do you think it's kind of something you're either born with or you're not?
You know what? I will say if you have the right leadership, then heck yeah. And
Okay.
I only, maybe I wouldn't have always had that answer, but I do have an experience with one seller at my previous firm. She was in the marketing department, never really had like a big boy job before ever, but there was just something about her. And I like hijacked her and I was like, yo, come into sales. Let's give it 6 months. But she was just so coachable, man, and was just a sponge to, oh, let me try it this way. Let me try it that way. Oh, that worked for you, but that's what works for me. it all goes back to the leadership. Is I don't want to handcuff anybody. I want them to play to their strengths. And you know what? Sometimes in that capacity with the right leadership, if you have somebody that believes in you before you believe in yourself, there is just such an unlimited potential that could be hit when you open up those doors and go, look at this person that you could become. And they're hungry and they're captivated by the potential for growth. And so, all things considered, long-winded answer, if the candidate is hungry enough and they're coachable, that you can get anybody to be a rock star seller. It's not going to be the same way that I'm a seller or you, AJ, but they are going to find their own unique path of how to become a sales killer based off of just the rinse and repeat and that consistency and the exercise of being a student of the game.
If you had to pick like one word as like a descriptor of that personality type, what would you use it, or which would you use?
If I had to pick one word for that type of person, I mean, I probably already said like either coachable or hungry. You know what I mean?
Okay.
It's and they kind of work synonymous with each other. Is you know, because even going back to like, you've got a hyper outgoing personality. I'm obviously bonkers, and that's kind of our pocket. That works for us. But I know some sellers who are really introvert type of people, lower tone all the time, even when they're excited. But there's ways to put the stuff that works for you and me, AJ, into the playbook for somebody who perhaps is an introvert and they find their own unique outlet. And they're able to do that because they're hungry and they're not afraid and they're coachable. Like, sales is all about failing. If you don't show up every day just stoked out of your mind to hear people say no, like, that's the first mindset shift that you got to get out of.
Yeah, I mean, going back to the kind of Jocko references of like, I don't know how, I must be a top 0.1% listener of that video Go, and something tells me you probably know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I do, man.
It's not Go, good.
Good. Yeah, it's good.
And good. And looking at any negative scenario that comes across your mind, desk, your physical, whatever it may be, and just responding good and finding the silver lining to it. It's like we've been kind of throwing around the words like grit or tenacity. Like, that's kind of what we're looking for, of somebody that like can just kind of eat the shit and just go, you know what, give me another spoonful. I'm ready for it. Like, this energizes me, not because it's like, well, yeah, I'd much rather close a deal or like get a booking or find uncover a pain point and plug our solution into it. Like, yeah, that would all be a great scenario, but at the same time, the no's mean, okay, I have more data. It's not a loss. It's just more data to kind of aggregate together. But you've said in the past that people are twice as motivated to avoid loss as they are to chase gain.
Yeah. Now, loss aversion, baby.
Yeah, and Kevin Dorsey has also said something that like, reps are not money motivated. I wish they were, because otherwise, like, this would be so much easier for me. Why is that the case, and how do you keep that in mind as you're building out teams?
Well, again, it all goes back to the psychology. And so in decision making, like, just think of it as you have a car, right? It's a 2001 beat up Toyota. It still runs perfect. Are you going to purchase a new car, even though this one's running perfect? That would just be a decision to make a gain. That's probably a far more difficult choice for you to make. Now, take that same Toyota and you know the engine's going out, the transmission is about to bust. You got the quote on what a repair would be in comparison to just purchasing a new car. Now, all of a sudden, I'm not purchasing that new car for the benefit. It's to avoid the loss or a scenario where I don't have any car at all. And so just intuitively, humans are more implied to make a decision based off of avoiding the loss rather than achieving a gain. So taking that comprehensive understanding and whittling it into how we sell in today's environment is stay away from the, oh, we can 10x your this, and this is going to be your bottom line revenue, and all this awesome stuff that will be a byproduct of the service or the product that you're providing. But lean into the, well, what happens if nothing changes? You know, like, we've identified this pain point. We're both on the same page that this is a pain point. Let's dig into what if we do nothing about this pain point. And now you're kind of highlighting the potential consequences of non-action rather than the awesome benefits of immediately taking an action. And so that's loss aversion.
I heard an amazing a descriptor of motivation, and in this sense, I think aversion I can maybe swap out those words in terms of like, I'm motivated to either move towards a positive or a negative affect here. If you think of like a paper mache boat, right, just kind of bobbing on a water, and you have a fan behind it. When you turn the fan on, that's motivation. And when you're this close, that motivation is really, really strong, whether it's positive or negative, but the motivation is really strong. But as the boat moves further away, that motivation becomes less and less powerful. So you need something on the other side to kind of pull it. So I really love the idea of using something like the loss aversion or the opportunity cost to say like, hey, this is the benefit, but also let's keep in mind that like there is a negative consequence to inaction here too. So you have the, let's pull you in one direction and also push you from another, but they're working succinctly.
No, they do.
Yeah,
they do
for
in
sure.
tandem. And look, to be fair, like some industries, it's an easier identifier than others. Like I live in the accounts receivable management world, right? So consequence of poor AR is like, dude, unpaid balances, net loss, doubtful allowance, like that's a really easy thing for me to lean on and highlight because it's a consequence that directly impacts profitability. But that, it's not always that easy. And so I do feel blessed in that landscape to be able to quickly, like, I've got my kind of cues and triggers at what my approach will be to lean into what happens if nothing happens versus this is what will happen if we act today.
I want to stay on the car topic for a little bit because you've also talked about the red car theory. When you see something, I'll toss it over to you. How about you explain it to us, and then also maybe apply it to how do you use that to capitalize sales opportunities?
No, I love the red car. So in essence, the red car theory, which full disclosure, I did not come up with. I remain a student of the game, and so I read it somewhere and it clicked for me. So red car theory.
Shut the podcast down then. I'm not
interested. You know what I mean? Full ownership. I don't know. In essence, the red car theory is that if you're driving on the road and you get to whatever destination and somebody taps you on the shoulder and goes, hey, how many red cars did you see on the road? Chances are you're going to be like, I don't know. Well, 1, 2, like I've got no idea. But if before you got in the car, that same person called and said, hey, you're going to be here in 20 minutes. While you're driving, I want you to identify how many red cars you see on the road. You're going to get to that location and be like, dude, I saw red cars everywhere. There were far more than what I thought. And even to that point, you are going to even manipulate, that one's kind of burgundy. So boom, that's red for me. Or, oh, that one's kind of like a darker pink. It could be a shade of red. And so the concept behind that is that if you are focused on finding something, whether it's a pain point or what's the trigger word to find my avenue to pursue a sale or an angle of benefit for you, if you're focusing on those objectives, chances are you're either going to find it right away or you're going to find something to interpret how you get there. Like burgundy is not red, but I did see a burgundy car. And so that might get me just enough to begin the conversation because I identified it. So it's really all about like the magic of focusing on something and your ability to then calculate that, take it, and then pivot into something that you could leverage when it comes to dialogue. Red car theory.
I love the red car theory, and I mean anybody that's been shopping for a new vehicle, it knows this explicitly.
Man.
Yeah. And if you don't start seeing those vehicles, you should probably reconsider, unless it's a high performance Lamborghini or Ferrari or something like that. I'm a sucker of buying the weird
I haven't
ones.
seen many Bugattis on the road today, AJ. You're like, well, there's like maybe one in every,
Well, that's what convinced me not to get one. If I can be honest with you, Chris, I was like, I don't know if the reliability's there. Otherwise,
there you go. There you go.
The focus. A lot of areas to focus when it comes to selling people, conversations, et cetera, down the line. And one area where I think people may be misaligned in their focus these days is around that buzzword that is personalization insofar as outreach, right? I've been making the switch myself and using different vernacular. I know the industry is kind of making a bit of a shift as well to move from something that is quote personalized to something that is relevant. And
Yeah.
you've even said outreach isn't noise when it's relevant. It's a very simple concept, but like how can somebody focus on the relevant side of selling, and like what are maybe some of the triggers that would say, okay, this is relevant for my ICP, or maybe it isn't and it's just falls into that noise category.
Yeah. Well, I mean, to be fair, I think that you hit the nail on the head with the intro, is that personalization is not relevance. I can't just shoot you a cold DM, AJ, and be like, hey, I saw that you went to John Hughes High School. That's awesome. That has zero, that's personalization. Yeah, it's directly a fact or a detail about me, but that has nothing to do with the driver of the conversation, right? So relevance would be more like, and again, I can speak to my industry, but there's so many different ways that you can curtail it. Like something relevant would be, on a job hiring board, Indeed. So let's say you're an HR manager or looking for a new AR specialist or whatever it is. You go, hey, AJ saw that you guys put up a couple open spots for your HR department. What's going on for those positions to open? That is relevant if I'm trying to sell an HR service, or if I see that people are hiring billing and invoicing agents, say, hey, like, do you guys have stretch bandwidth? Or I always use the expression from Biggie Smalls. Biggie Smalls said it best, like more money, more problems. And so are you guys just growing at such a scale right now that you need to increase your internal invoicing or billing department? Like, talk to me about that. So that's hyper relevant.
Get an email.
Yeah.
If I get an email with the subject line "more money, more problems,"
I'm it's coming from me,
sure.
Dude. You already know. But yeah, man, it's the real difference between personalization and relevance. Like, and some personalization, hyper creepy, dude. That will trigger sales resistance immediately. Like,
what are some of those? What are some of the creepy ones?
Like, well, just going back to the high school, I've had people reach out and review what my high school mascot was, or like what I went to community college. I didn't even know what our mascot was, but they'd be like, yo, and go birds. Who are the birds, man? Like, first of all, that has nothing to do with the direction of the conversation. But now I'm more curious at like, how much time did it take you to identify that I went to this high school for you to determine that this was my mascot? What a wild goose chase to get us absolutely nowhere just so that you could satisfy hyper personalization in your outreach. Like, that's like wiping before you poop. It doesn't make sense.
That may be the title of this video: how to wipe before you poop.
Clip it.
Unbelievable. Okay, so I very much agree. Not to hesitate on that, but I do agree. And like I've used personalization, again, kind of the air scare quotes here around it when talking, especially on that like mascot topic, the collegiate, the alumni, because I know that is a huge one, especially on LinkedIn.
It's a go-to
company, and that it's right there. But I generally try to use it when I'm starting a conversation and when it's relevant, like March Madness is going on, or we're kind of at the tail end of it. College football is a big one, but at the same time, I'm not starting with that. So how do you think about, like, if at all, do you incorporate any sort of personalization, or do you leave that for the sales call when we're doing what we're doing now, chumming it up and be like, hey, by the way, saw you went to Miami, go Hurricanes?
No, it's a great question. And to be fair, yes, I do use the personalization. It's probably not going to be in any initial discussion or dialogue or cold approach, but I will use the personalization in more of the relationship nurturing as we're getting interested towards a disco, or maybe we are headed towards the contract stage. And the thing about personalization is that if sales reps would just open their eyes to the magic that people are putting on the platform, particularly with respect to sports, man, like, we've already had our initial engagement, but I saw last week that you did post something about that snotty 3-pointer end of the game for UConn that took them past Duke. heck yeah, I'm going to reference that. It's not going to be my starting point, but that's a very personalized type of like, dude, I saw that you saw that. That was fire, bro. So there's a way to integrate personalization. And again, that personalization, it has to be a little bit relevant. If this dude didn't talk about the Yukon 3-pointer, I'm probably not going to be like, hey, AJ, did you catch that 3-pointer the other day? There's so much gold about what people post on the platform, and your ability to take that, leverage it, and build it into something personalized for more of the relationship building side. That's where I would use it for sure.
I mean, I have part-time taco sommelier in my LinkedIn bio, and listen, I go through on like almost a weekly basis now. I look at that and I go, should I move on from that? It was kind of stupid. It was a little bit of a joke, but at the same time, the number of conversations, positive conversations, and especially the some of them that have now equated into like real business relationships because of that silly little emoji. It's like that, to exactly that point of like, there's so much gold, like you don't even really need to dig. You just kind of have to look
No,
down.
it's right in front of you, man.
You just have to look for the little red golden cars that are driving by.
Exactly.
So and I appreciate this because there is a timing element to the relevance factor, as you kind of mentioned. Like, you can't bring up the Yukon 3-pointer probably now, especially when this goes live. Like, we'll be well past March Madness.
Yeah.
What does the timing look like, especially as it relates to channels? Like, can you be quicker on the rapport building if you got somebody on a cold call versus an email versus, like LinkedIn? I know you said play the long game. Like, to me, if I'm chatting with somebody on LinkedIn, that'll be a slow burn. Which I would imagine, like, you only got a couple seconds when you got somebody on the phone to keep them on the phone, and then from there it might be a little bit quicker. But talk to me about the timing and the relevance with respect to the channel.
Yeah, man. Well, and I think that it is all circumstantial, and it's circumstantial on the basis of, is this a cold call? Did I call you out of the blue? Chances are I'm not going to bring it up because I want to respect the integrity of your time. So this call is going to be less than 3 minutes, and I'm really just going to use my little hook to see if there's any interest. I'm not going to sell you anything. Just want to see if it makes sense to discuss, or am I way off base here? Now, let's say that we get onto a disco, whether it's digital, whether it is over the phone, and that goes to left brain, right brain mentality. Check it out. Even if my right brain guy, my analytical guy, lower tonal inflection, I feel like this is a really professional conversation, probably not going to bring up the Yukon 3-pointer, but if I was able to read that you are influenced by emotions and storytelling and the case study side, yeah, I feel like that's right on the money, especially if I saw you post about it earlier in the week. And that's why sales is so hard, dude. There's so many moving parts. It's not a one size fits all. What worked for this guy in this exact same scenario, probably not going to work for that guy in that exact same scenario. So going back to kind of the power of tactical empathy is, dude, read the room, and sometimes I got a whole slew of notes of stuff that is more on the relevancy side or the personalization side that I don't find the window to bring it up. And I'm not going to force it onto the conversation. That just makes me feel gross. And so that decision making in real time is really on the basis of the critical or unique circumstances.
Yeah, I mean, again, going back to like the sports topic, the context, the relevance, all of that. I feel like even relevance is probably too broad. It probably needs to be like contextual relevance or something like that,
Yeah.
because I've got a number of buddies, big sport heads in a number of different related sports, and those guys they're wearing polos every single day, and they've got a little icon on their chest just like I do here, and it's usually from their collegiate team or some sort of sport that they're referencing, and there's a lot of context to that, and reading the room is a big one. So for somebody, like, I would imagine that there are sales leaders that are just say, hey, if you see somebody wearing a polo and they've got the logo on it, you call that out immediately, because you build rapport right off the bat without taking into any context. And I know that you've discussed in the book, like, selling, like, it's the permission slip to sell like yourself, and of course
Yeah.
win. If you have somebody that's getting I would say like half decent advice like that, but again, missing the big context of it. Like, how do you coach or teach or let them know that, like, hey, there's a lot of moving factors, and you have to weigh them all to see what's the most important and where you think is going to get where you're going to get the most leverage from without feeling like you're reading from a script.
Yeah. So, and that really kind of goes back to two things that we touched on a little bit. So, one is consistency. None of my guys have scripts, but there is a foundation. There is kind of like, here's the ebb and flow of how a really solid call might go, but don't read off the script, dude. Put it in your own terms and your own words. So, that's one side of it. The second thing, most importantly, is fail, bro. Fail fast, fail furious, and fail forwards. Fail, again, I didn't make this up, but I love the acronym. First attempt in learning. Sometimes it's not the very first. Sometimes you got to fail about 50 times before you find the shtick. But ultimately, that's where you get to the level where the circumstances make you feel confident in mentioning, hey, this guy's wearing a Yukon shirt, or not mentioning it. Is because look, you're going to hit a handful of scenarios where you feel like, dude, this is the perfect time to mention it. And you just get that flat, like, yeah, I'm wearing a Yukon shirt. So anyways, you're like, dude, that one burned. So you got to just like exercise the consistency and A/B test. And with technology today, dude, not so much on your ability to look at a Yukon shirt, but there are like these call simulators out there where you can talk to an AI bot. And as a leader, I use a ton of call simulators, especially with my debt collection department, my sales department, because I could put in super unique scenarios. And a lot of the times I mess with my sellers and I'll put in a unique scenario, but I'll tell the robot or the AI, no matter what, do not accept the meeting. Give him every single ridiculous objection in the book. Like, even if it's bonkers and makes no sense, do not take it. Because it's a fun exercise to hear these guys on the phone. You kind of feel pressureless because it's not a real person. You know, you're talking to a robot, but it allows that creativity in your brain to be like, how do I beat this thing? So those are the two things: consistency and fail, man. Fail often. And you're going to find it. You're going to find when it's appropriate to bring up the college and when you should probably just leave it on the pink slip.
So we covered a lot of topics of reading, right? We've read your corporate casual book. We're trying to read the room here, and you've said sales is a lot like reading a book to your kids' classroom. Break that down for me.
Brutal. Well, and it kind of just goes on what we just taught with the consistency and the fail forwards, and the practice makes perfect. Like, so it was about a month ago, I got invited to my kids' classroom to read a book. Some kids were super jazzed. And look, I'm animated. I know I'm a goofy guy. So did I give each of the characters voices? You bet your ass I did. You know what I mean? And that really vibed with some of the kids in the classroom. There were a couple flounders in there that, like, I don't even realize that they were at school at the moment, or that there was a guest speaker reading a book. There were some that they're just confused. They weren't focused on the story. They were more focused on the fact that I was trying to be so animated. And so they were kind of like being loud and rambunctious, distracting the story from others on the basis of me just trying to add some color to the voices of the narrative. And so the way that that relates into the sales world is you're going to be faced with that over and over and over. If it's a single human, it's easier for you to pivot to match your approach, or it's easier for you to meet them on their level. But if you are in like a group meeting and you're doing this presentation, or there's a disco and there's 5 different C-suites and they all host different personalities, that is the exact scenario that I felt when I was reading this kid's book to the classroom. Because some people were all about it. Some people had no idea that they were even in a meeting. And some were just so distracted by a detail that had nothing to do with the service or the offering or the benefit that I was there for. So it was a major like balancing act. We were juggling, dude, but we made it through. So that's how sales is a lot like reading a children's book to the classroom.
Does that Does that influence the way you think about kind of picking a champion as well? Like if you find somebody, because you're the animated guy, because you're the one to give the voice to, you know, in this case, we'll say like the products and the features of the service. Like if you find the guy in the room that's vibing a bit more, that's throwing it back, that's taking the personalization, the relevant cues pretty well. Like, is that who you attach to, or do you have to give more weight to somebody, to, you know, the slicked back pinstripe wearing CEO in the back, because he's the one that cuts a check at the end?
Yeah, well, and I think, dude, again, you kind of nailed it. Is maybe at first I'm going to play into the guy that's vibing with me just because that's going to give me confidence. But ultimately, and hopefully, I've done my research before the call. I know who my gatekeepers are who really don't need to be there. I know who my influencers are, no, and I know who my decision makers are. And so if I'm identifying that my decision maker is not vibing with my approach at all, I'm more than likely going to pivot to try and match tone and his emotional influence on the call. And so in that scenario, maybe I don't give the characters voices anymore. And I just kind of straight shooter read through it because I want to appeal to my decision maker and I want to appeal to my influencer. And so, yeah, I would definitely pivot.
The moment you think you've got it figured out is usually the moment your pipeline starts proving you don't.
Yeah.
I kind of want to bridge two topics here. So I think I can also swap out pipeline for children. The moment you think you have it figured out, your children will start proving you're wrong. How do you think about, I know you've already kind of mentioned this beforehand, but how do you think about using and being a seller, and somebody who is exciting like this, to both influence pipeline, to continue to iterate and optimize and test and be curious, and then also kind of on like the family side, like being a dad, like how do you also do this with your family to keep them, you know, growing and learning, and of course like excited to be part of the family and doing what they're doing?
Yeah. Well, and I think that the child sub out is an excellent substitution because it's all on the basis of constant evolution. When my 7-year-old was 4, yeah, I'm down on my hands and knees. I'm playing with the Barbie car and I'm making noises. If I did that to my 7-year-old right now, she'd be like, Dad, what the hell are you doing, man? Like, do you want to go play a card game at the table? And so that was the evolution of her just through the nature of growth. Sales is the same way, man. And that's why there are so many yucky sellers today, is because they're not harnessing the evolution. Look, back in the day, you could do a 5,000 email blast campaign and you would probably lock in a ton of interested parties. Today, that spray and pray tactic, it just doesn't work. It feels super yucky. So it's really just leaning into what worked back in the day will not necessarily still work today. And now we've got the evolution of technology and additional channels and this new term of like social selling. Those are all evolvements in the same exact craft. And so that's why I would say the moment that you think that you have your pipeline or your approach figured out, that's when, you know, you turn off the floodgates of being a student of the game. And that's like the worst thing that you could ever do. You got to constantly evolve. Like, man, when I first started selling, I wasn't sending video DMs to people. Like, what the hell is that nonsense? And now video DM might be like one of the strongest vehicles for people to be like, I'm putting a face to a name. This guy seems goofy. I may not take the meeting, but at the very least, I'm going to respond and be like, yo, this was really unique. So it's all about harnessing and leveraging the evolution and keep growing, dude. Can't stop, won't stop mentality.
Have you used the kind of red car theory, to bring it back to that? Have you used that at all in the child rearing aspect of your life? Like, have you started A/B testing the way that they're doing things, or do they have like an anchor phrase or something that you go, oh, okay, I have to really dig in on this,
dude? 100%, and especially with the kids, it's far more on the basis of them having just wildly different personalities. You know, my oldest is a lot more outgoing and hyper, kind of like me. My youngest she's a silly goose, but she's so smart, man. She's so intuitive. She's like knows how to control her emotions is a lot more like my wife. So my oldest, bro, she'll go off the rails, man. And, how I approach her going off the rails is wildly different than how I would approach my youngest, Kylie, going off the rails. She'd be more inclined. And dude, there's a story I tell all the time, but like before I got into corporate sales, I was a women's college soccer coach, right? And that's really what taught me everything about leadership is when I first started that job, it took 3 weeks for the entire team to hate me. Like I knew they hated me because they told me to my face. Like it was that bad. And so what I did was I pivoted into an exercise where I really leaned on the different personalities of the team. I could scream at one girl and bro, that would fire her up and she'll hit the pitch and just be a murderer. But if I scream at another girl, I just deflated all 4 tires. She's got no belief in herself. She's going to hit the field and absolutely crumble. And so taking that type of approach, especially when you go back to red car theory or when you are in a disco with multiple personalities, I am trying to look for the red car. And the red car in that circumstance is, can I scream at you and that's going to fire you up? Or do I need to be a little bit more sensitive and more like, hey, believe in yourself, believe in, the direction that we're heading. And so, yeah, all things considered, it for sure applies to both.
Chris, this was a lot of fun, man. Let us know where we can find you, Kollecta, Dadgood, all of it. Where can we go find, listen, and tune in more?
So most importantly, as most of you guys know, if you're seeing this on the platform, I recently transitioned as Chief Growth Officer of Kollecta.ai, nationally licensed third-party debt recovery firm. We are really changing the face of what debt recovery looks like. Our website is Kollecta.ai. Our LinkedIn is Kollecta.ai, and it's smothered all over my LinkedIn page, so you'll find us there. Dadgood, really the bread and butter of the most pride that I have is as a community of working fathers. We have a Slack channel where people are tremendously vulnerable with each other. Men have this negative bias where we won't ask for directions, we won't ask for help. And for those reasons, suicide rates in men are higher than we've ever seen ever. So this is really a platform for fathers to allow themselves to be vulnerable and be able to just get tremendous support. We've got the LinkedIn platform. We've got the Dadgood Community Podcast. You can find us on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, all those different streaming services. And then finally, I did release a book called Corporate Casual for one day and one day only. It was a sales Amazon bestseller, and I will carry that to my grave, baby. All I needed was one day. Boom, and I got it. And to AJ's point, when he teed me up, it really is just about cutting out the fluff, selling authentically, being a real person, not being one of those slime dogs. And so you can type in Corporate Casual on Amazon. You can type in my name on Amazon, and you'll be able to find access to the book.
Amazing. Awesome. Chris, thank you so much, man.
So fun. AJ, been following you forever. Tremendous fan of your content, the value you put on the platform, and just you as a human being, dude. Even from our very first DMs, I think it both clicked immediately, like, we're probably going to have a lot of fun. So looking forward to continuing to engage with you, bro.
I very much appreciate it. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, man.